My books, my clothes, my mugs, my jewelry. We often attach ourselves to things. We want to collect them as a means to expand our worth. We take ownership over things and we are really protective over our things. Our emotional attachment to things is often so strong that we often measure our value as a person by the amount of things we have or by the financial value of the things that we have. Because of this leads to us wanting to own more and buy more, to expand the value of us and this sense of who we are. Words like I, mine, my, myself are all words that are some of the most used words in our vocabulary. As children, we don't have this sense of self. That's why babies don't recognize themselves in the mirror at a very early stage, and slowly they develop this sense of self. This is me. And we also start to associate our thoughts with ourself, who we are. And we start to learn things like my room, my toys, my parents. When a toy gets broken or gets taken away, it creates this discomfort. And it's not because of the intrinsic value of the toy is now diminished. It's because we have attached ourselves as children to that toy. And when it is broken or taken away, it in a sense feels like a part of ourselves has been taken away or broken. And it is because we have attached the sense of self to the toy. We've expanded the sense of self to our belongings as well. When we grow up, we continue to attach our sense of self to our things, but not only our things, also our jobs. And this is also why people try to find their style that represents them the best, or find interior design that best represents themselves, because they have expanded their sense of self to physical things in their surroundings. There's not a problem with wanting to express who you feel like you are through your things per se, but the issue is that with that we also attach ourselves emotionally to items that we own or that are around us. We also do this with jobs or relationships, and once those things where we have attached ourselves to are taken away, that creates discomfort and suffering, and because we have attached ourselves emotionally to those things. We become sad and unsure when those things are no longer around because we associate ourselves so much with those items. We say things like, I deserve to own this, I deserve to buy this, I've deserved this. Not to say that we don't deserve it, but it doesn't expand the value of us, the worth of us when we own that additional item, but in some way we think we do. When we turn this around and look at this at the perspective of other people, we do this as a society, that we judge people and their worth by the things that they own or don't own. Now, this sounds horrible when I say it like this, but when we think about it, we do this. Is there someone that is really nicely put together, maybe wearing a suit, driving a respectable car, and it seems like they're working at a respectable company and office, we in some way have this sense of respect and awe towards that person. And in contrast to that, if there's someone that is obviously living on the streets, has holes in their clothes, has dirty clothes, maybe is smelly, we automatically devalue that person to some degree compared to that other person. But obviously what things we own or don't own, it doesn't change the value of who we are as a person. Not only do we often see the things that we own as extensions of ourselves or identify with that, we often also identify with our jobs. And I think that's also a big reason why many people, or most people, are really unsatisfied and unhappy with their jobs, because they feel like the job doesn't represent them correctly, or it doesn't show their worth correctly. And of course, if you're unhappy with your job, you should do something about it, and you can do something about it. But this always wanting more and wanting to expand our self-worth in some arbitrary way with outside things is not going to work. No matter what we own or don't own, or what job we have or don't have, it doesn't change the intrinsic value of us as a person. Now, you might hear this and totally agree, or it might even seem a little obvious, that things don't change the value of who we are. Maybe you're hearing this for the first time, but even if you do think that you agree or this is obvious, oftentimes we agree with it and understand it logically, but underneath, the unconscious mind doesn't necessarily grasp this, or maybe also doesn't want to grasp this, because a lot of what we do and the sense of self that we attach to things outside of us is something that is very ego driven, and anything that attacks our ego will feel very uncomfortable and we'll want to not listen to and just shut out. So now I've talked a lot about ways and how we attach ourselves to items, especially emotionally. But how do we detach ourselves from the things that we own to, for one, better live a more satisfied, happy, minimalistic life, but also for it to be easier to let go of things. And then also going forward, not to buy as much things and want to expand that sense of self-worth with buying more stuff. Now, it is definitely easier said than done, and I don't think it's an overnight process. There definitely has to be a mindset shift that happens, and even though once it happens, I think you have to constantly remind yourself of that. I'm personally also still really susceptible to expanding my sense of self to the things that I own or the things that I do. But I do have 5 tips that I think can really help to shift your mindset. So the first one is to know the concept of hedonic adaptation. Now, I've talked about this quite some time. It basically talks about no matter how expensive the thing that you buy is or how much you want it, in the long run you will get bored of it. In the long run you will get used to it and it won't be as exciting anymore. There is this high and this rush when we buy something, when we acquire something new, when we add something to our collection with which we identify with, and there's this feeling of expanding our sense of self or self-worth in some way, but this feeling will always fade. You will always want to chase the next thing. And as I said before, it's not possible to expand your sense of self and your value and your self-worth with collecting items. It falsely feels like it, but in the long run, you will notice that that does not work. You will always want more, and you can never satisfy that sense of hunger of wanting something, because once you gain that, you will want the next thing. So as I said, I've talked about this already. The important thing is to shift your mindset to really understand that adding things into your life or adding things to your belongings will not change the value of who you are. It will not expand your self-worth in any way. We're all born with this inherent worth that we can offer to others and offer to the world, and that doesn't change no matter who we are, what we do, what we own, what we don't own. It's nothing that anyone can take away from us or add to. So imagine you suddenly lost all of your belongings. You wouldn't have less value or worth as a person if you lost all your belongings. So the same way, if you add to your belongings, you're not really adding any value or sense of worth to yourself. Picture someone wearing a $3,000 dress walking down the street and suddenly spilling coffee over their dress just because the dress that they own is now of less financial value. Doesn't mean that the person that is wearing the dress is now of less value, if that makes sense. Shifting this mindset can be a really powerful way to sever that attachment that we have towards things, and that ultimately just feeds our ego. The next thing to consider is to view things from a more rational perspective rather than an emotional perspective. So especially when it comes to collecting things, wanting to expand the sense of who we are and our self-worth, and purchases, they're often very emotionally driven. So we should really try to view things from a more rational perspective. So when you want to buy something, ask yourself, will this tool help me in such and such area, or will this tool help me in some way? So see things as tools, instead of asking yourself, does this represent me? Does this suit me? Because that is so much more of an emotional approach that we have towards buying things. When we see things as tools that are here to help us, then we can view it from less of an emotional perspective, and we start to detach ourselves and our emotional attachment to that item. Like a car, when you view a car as a tool to get you from A to B, you won't be so much concerned with what brand is this car, what does it look like, what is the interior, what does it feel like, is it a car that suits me? There's nothing wrong with being specific and trying to pick the best car for you, but if a car suits you or not should be according to the tools that you need. So if you need a car that goes from A to B reliably, then that should be your main priority. If you, for some reason, need a fast car, which isn't realistic, then that in that case would be your priority. But oftentimes we choose cars as a sense of status. Does this suit me? Is it a cute car because I view myself as a cute person? We often don't approach buying things in a practical way, but shifting our mindset to view things more as tools will help us to detach ourselves emotionally from our items. Another exercise that I find personally very helpful is to view your items detached from yourself. So we have this obsession with acquiring things, owning things, buying things, and we have this kind of obsession with hoarding things also, you could almost call it, because we don't really want to share it with people. We want to collect as much as possible, and we proudly show other people what we've bought and what we've acquired, what our collection looks like. But when we detach ourselves, the self, from the item, we can look at it so much more emotionally detached and more as something that helps me my day-to-day. So let's take a book as an example. So imagine the book in the production process. What type of people might that book have touched in the production of the book? Where are the materials sourced? What is it from? Is it from a tree? Imagine that tree in nature. Then when the book moves towards being displayed in the bookstore, what hands has that book gone through? Who has picked up that book to look at it? Who has considered purchasing it? And maybe even if it's a secondhand book, imagine who was the previous owner, what value has that book brought to them. Then also imagine the book in your possession. So what do you plan on doing with this book, and then how do you plan on enjoying this book? And then go forward and imagine that book down the line, maybe it changing owners and going into someone else's hand, maybe it ultimately being recycled. What happens when the book is recycled? Where does it go? Maybe some parts of it do also return back to the earth. So to see that book in its complete life cycle, in a sense, where does it start? What does it go through? Where does it end up? And through this exercise, you realize that we are such a small speck in this lifespan of the book, and we can see the book so much more for itself, the item itself, and we detach ourself away from the book. We change the perspective from this very egocentric view of me owning this book and only imagining the book in the context of myself, and instead expanding and viewing the book more in a zoomed out view. When we take a step back, we can truly appreciate the book for what it is, for the tool that it is, so with the purpose of educating or entertaining. And when we realize that is the tool, or in a sense the purpose of the book, at least for me, I feel so much more of this urge to share the purpose of the book, in a sense. So wanting to maybe lend it to friends for them to also be able to appreciate it as much as possible before it runs its full life cycle, in a sense. The next tip is to try to eliminate the words mine, my from our vocabulary. So you don't have to completely not use those words, but be very conscious when you do use the word, and maybe try to use it less. So instead of saying this is my book, say this is a book, because it truly is a book. And why put so much focus on the fact that I own this book? Or say, instead of saying this is my home, this is a home. because truthfully, this wasn't my home forever. The lifespan of myself is so short. It is guaranteed that someone else lived here before me, even if not in this house, then on this land, and others will live here after me. So why put so much emphasis on the fact of the ownership? So this is not my seat, but a seat. And the sense of ownership is so temporary that we shouldn't try to put too much focus on it. And that helps us really detach emotionally from the item, because we see it for what it is. It is a tool to be used by myself, but also by others, instead of focusing so much on wanting to own it. And to, with that, expand this sense of who I am with the book. Language is a very powerful tool, and I think being mindful of that can be very helpful. So I hope these were some very refreshing and interesting insights on how to detach yourself emotionally from items. It is something that is very, very difficult. And as I said, there's nothing in a sense wrong with wanting to express what you're feeling or how you view yourself through your items, but with that, it is very, very dangerous that we attach ourselves emotionally to our things because we see it as an extension of ourselves. So I hope these tips are helpful. Let me know in the comments down below which one sounded the most intriguing to you that you want to try. Give it a thumbs up if you learned something new, and share it with others so we can spread this knowledge to other people. Thank you so much for watching this video and spending time with me. I truly appreciate it. If you want more videos and tips on minimalism, living with less, and living more consciously, then be sure to subscribe for more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!